I never imagined finding an old dresser with a strange-looking leaf pressed onto the front drawer. You'd think I was desperate for a restoration project when I picked up this old dresser for just $2.99 at a local thrift store. I mean, just look at this dresser. There's no base, a severely damaged Formica top, tarnished hardware, and of course, the obvious, a full collage of magazine cutouts glued across every drawer front. Regardless, there is without question an interesting story behind this piece. It's the kind of piece that makes you stop and ask yourself, where do I even start with a project like this? Well, I don't really know, but there's an empty spot next to my bed, and with the phone charging on the floor and remotes scattered everywhere, this is a problem I've been waiting to solve, and I think this old dresser deserves a second chance. My name is Barry, and it's good to be with you again. Let's see if together we can uncover this unique story, and perhaps give this old piece a new life. When you look closely at this collage, everything appears to be cut from magazines, posters and flyers, and advertising campaigns. It's all paper-based, printed imagery, torn by hand and glued down. My guess is that it was an early 2000s school project for art or graphic design. And I almost overlooked this beautiful leaf. It's real and has long, narrow sawtooth edges. With its 7-leaflet symmetrical arrangement, maybe it's from a rare flowering plant or something. I do my best to uncover the true story behind each piece, but will refrain from translating some things that may be offensive. This is a Formica top, and I have a different plan for it, but with significant damage on one corner, the first thing I need to do is mix up a 2-part epoxy and patch this void. This epoxy filler will dry quickly, but I'll sand this smooth later. I guess you could refer to this piece as either a large nightstand or a small 4-drawer dresser, likely manufactured sometime around the middle of the 20th century. Regardless, the closer I looked at it, the more veneer damage I discovered. I've restored and refinished many old furniture pieces, but I'm embarrassed to say I wasn't able to confidently identify the wood species used for the veneer on this piece, so maybe you can help me with that as I proceed. Once I've removed all the drawer pulls, I'll move on to the part that I'm dreading the most, removing all the paper glued onto the drawer fronts. Maybe you have a suggestion as to how I could have accomplished this efficiently. I wasn't sure what kind of adhesive was used, so I tried every method I could think of to remove this paper. I first tried simply scraping it off with the carbide scraper, but this did not work the way I had hoped. I need to be mindful to protect the thin layer of veneer hiding under all this paper, so the next method I tried was brushing on a chemical stripper. I didn't expect this to work, but thought I would at least give it a try. While the chemical stripper was setting up, I thought maybe I could use a heat gun to soften the adhesive underneath. I even tried to scrape the paper off with a utility blade, but this method would have taken me days to complete. What if I try a hot iron over a damp cloth? Maybe this would actually soften the adhesive. What I found was that the paper just stuck to the cloth, so this wasn't going to work. None of these techniques yielded the results I was hoping for, so I decided on a more aggressive method, a last-ditch effort if you will. I attached an 80 grit sanding disc to the Surf Prep orbital sander and began sanding, hoping to avoid burning through the thin layer of veneer. This actually worked, but I had to tilt the sander ever so slightly and apply gentle pressure, two things I wouldn't normally do. I'm quite surprised that each drawer took about 15 minutes to sand, and I was lucky not to pass through the veneer even once. I'll then sand the drawer fronts with hand sanding blocks and a sanding pad from 150 grit to 220 grit. I did snag a small piece of veneer while passing over the edge with the sanding pad, so I'll glue this down and spray on some accelerator to help this dry faster. Now that I know this method works, I'll sand the rest of the drawers with an 80 grit sanding disc. There are several drawer fronts that have chip veneer, but I think this happened long before the paper was ever applied. I'll call these good for now and return to them later. Any guesses yet regarding this wood species? It's a normal part of my routine to use a thrift store vacuum to clean up during a project. This thrift store rug in my workshop has surprised many of you in the past. To put it simply, it's just easier on my feet every day. Also, many of you were asking about the dogs in the last episode. They're both doing well. Louie has grown a lot, and he's always excited about something. Today was the first time I've seen him a bit too excited. I need to figure out a plan for a base. Somewhere I have a carton full of old furniture legs, but was unable to find them. I did, however, find these solid wood legs I purchased on Amazon 4 years ago. While the dresser is upside down, I'll also continue sanding everything from 150 grit to 220 grit. I discovered a few original screws holding together the body. I'll remove these and attempt to countersink the screws a little deeper so I can cover them with epoxy filler. I'm scuff sanding the epoxy filler and the Formica top. I plan to cover this with veneer and want a rough surface for the contact cement to adhere to. Thankfully, there weren't too many detail areas on this dresser that required hand sanding, and I was able to find the right sanding block to fit this profile. As I continued to sand this piece by hand, I did discover a few gaps that will need some epoxy filler. I need this piece to be functional, and these legs should provide adequate support for what I think is a heavy dresser for its smaller size. With the legs all mocked up, I'll begin applying new veneer over the Formica top. I've had this piece of veneer sitting in my basement for more than 4 years. This might be birch, I'm not really sure. Is it my favorite species? No, but I think this is the perfect project to finally use it. I'll use a utility knife to score a line just past the dimensions of the dresser top. A few gentle passes should allow for a clean break. I'll clean the Formica surface with wax wash remover, then roll on contact cement and wait until it's tacky. Once I think it's ready, I'll carefully align and press the veneer, and once I'm confident it's where I want it, I'll apply more pressure with a roller. Finally, I'll secure this with clamps and some lumber I have in the shop, then let this dry overnight. I've been looking forward to this part because I think that the non-magnetic drawer pulls are solid brass. I'll first use the fine wire wheel to remove the tarnish, then polish the pulls with the buffing wheel. I usually cover brass pulls with a lacquer for brass, but this time I think I want them to tarnish a little before doing so. The next morning, I'll remove the clamps, turn the dresser upside down, and cut the veneer to size with a utility knife. With a small hand sanding block, I'll smooth off the edges of the veneer, then sand the surface with 180 grit and 220 grit using the orbital sander. At this point, I'm finally ready to see if my vision is actually going to come together for this piece. I spend a lot of time on the road hauling old furniture, stacks of firewood, tools, and yes, even the dogs. So I'm pleased to continue partnering with Lasfit, making these restorations possible. Their custom-fit floor mats snap perfectly into place, with raised edges that actually trap the dirt and water, and the mud that I drag in after a long day. These mats keep the interior looking new, with no slipping, no curling at the edges, and no mess getting underneath. A quick rinse and they look brand new again. But what really surprised me was their bed liner. When I tell you this thing has saved my truck, I genuinely mean it. The textured surface keeps furniture from sliding around. I used to worry about scratches and dents. Now, not so much. And on the days when the dogs jump in for an adventure, the floor mats protect the upholstery from those muddy paws. So whether you're a woodworker, a weekend DIYer, a dog owner, or just someone who wants to keep their vehicle looking great, by choosing Lasfit, you're choosing to support my channel, and you're playing a part in making these restorations possible. For that, I want to say a heartfelt thank you. Lasfit mats help protect your investment, so check the link in the video description, or visit lasfit.com to see if they offer floor mats or bed liners for your vehicle. Use code MCM20 for 20% off your order. Thanks to Lasfit for continuing to support my channel, and for helping me protect the truck that makes all these restorations possible. The plan was to sand all the way to 220 grit, but I changed my mind at the last minute. Instead, I'll sand to 180 grit, keeping the wood fibers open. This should allow the penetrating stain to soak in deep, giving this piece a rich color. I'm planning to use this nightstand daily, and I want more of a dark, moody, masculine look. So instead of using a light walnut colored stain I often use on pieces like this, I chose to try this darker provincial color. There's nothing to lose here. This is an unmarked piece and has little to no monetary value, so why not just choose something a little less traditional? This darker color also seems fitting for this piece, because my best guess is that this wood species is white oak veneer that is, with solid oak trim. Looking back, I probably should not have used this leftover veneer. Whatever species it is, I don't care much for it. In fact, I applied a second coat of stain to cover up some of the imperfections. So yes, the top will be a little darker, but I guess it will mostly be covered by a lamp, remotes, and maybe a few books. Once the stain is dry, I'll spray on the first of many coats of shellac. This dries quickly and should be adequate protection. Between coats, I'll spray on a brown toner to help blend the contrasting pieces. I'll mix up some powder stains with shellac and do my best to blend all the epoxy filler. This usually takes me several attempts before I'm satisfied. I say this humbly. I'm proud of my hard work, but some things didn't go as planned with this project, and I can't say I'm thrilled with the outcome this time. But I'm blessed to be here, continuing to do what I love. This is the busiest time of year for my business, and I'm doing something I've never done before. This is episode 150, and I just released episode 149 a few days ago. I'm releasing several more restoration videos during this busy week, without sacrificing the quality of the projects. Tomorrow, episode 151 will be released, and will likely be one of my favorite story pieces yet. So make sure you're subscribed and have your notifications on. My name is Barry, and thanks for joining me. Goodbye for now.